Hello, welcome to this edition of Paranormal Lens. My name is Jamie Widener. I'm joined as usual by my co-hostesses, sir, these guys, Chad and David. Good evening, guys. What's going on?
Evening.
Not too much, Jamie. How are you?
A little under the weather, so bear with me on this one. I'm going to be the host tonight, and I'm hopefully not going to sniffle, cough, and sneeze through this as I did the whole rest of my day. So the meds are kicking in again, so hopefully we'll get through this. But I'm really excited for this episode. It's one that is a subject that has always been interesting to me since I started to understand the paranormal many years ago, and it is on the Bell Witch. And so I'll dig in and bear with me. We're going to go and just jump in with questions or anything along the way. But this story it really is a short story in the sense of the time that it goes through in the course of just a few short years. But it was a fairly traumatizing event to the Bell family. And it starts in 1782 when John Bell Sr. marries Lucy Williams in Edgecombe County, North Carolina, where they lived and raised their family for about 20 years. John was a successful farmer. He was a cooper. He was a guy of the community, a well-standing resident, faithful churchgoer, the whole nine yards, everything you would expect an upstanding citizen to be. But he had 6 kids, and they started to outgrow their place, and they needed to move. And a lot of the residents of North Carolina at the time were starting to migrate westward as new territories were opening. And he followed a group of friends and community members out to a place in Robertson County, Tennessee. And this is 1804 or so. It's along the Red River. And he moved the entire family and one of their slaves, Chloe, with him. So John was born in 1750. He passed in 1820. We'll talk more about his passing and the cause of that in a moment. But he has married Lucy. They had several children. They had Jesse, a son, John Jr., Drury, Benjamin, Esther, Zadok. What a cool name, Zadok, Zadok. Elizabeth, better known as Betsy, Richard, and Joel. So they moved and things were good. Right on, Dave. You never know. This is why we do live stuff, right?
Yeah.
So they moved up to from North Carolina to Tennessee, and the place they moved is about currently a town called Adams, and it's about 30 miles northwest-ish of present day Nashville. So just for some geography, it is eastern Tennessee, but in the day that was the western boundaries of where we were going still as a country. So they were there for a couple years. Again, they moved in 1804. Right around 1817, strange events began to happen. And actually, Chad, let's move some slides along here too. First one is a marker that's current, presenting the Bell Witch. Yes, one of these historical markers that we see around when we travel down our highways and byways. There is something here I'll touch on later. The Andrew Jackson piece was rather interesting because the many sons of John Bell, served under General Jackson in the Battle of New Orleans in the War of 1812, and he was from Nashville. The Hermitage is there still, his homestead, so he was not far from them, and the legend that he came to visit is interesting, and I'll get to that in a little bit. Next slide. This is a rendering of the original homestead. Unfortunately, it was torn down somewhere in the late 1800s, but the next slide is an actual picture of the property. So you can see it was pretty close, and there it's starting to look a little worn, so I can imagine it was just aged and needed to go for safety's sake. Okay, next slide. So this is an article from March 18th of 1819 talking about the Bell Witch haunting. And so this is when things, 1817 actually is when things started to get weird at the homestead. And the originalness of this started with John being out in one of his fields, again being a farmer, out in a cornfield, and he saw a black dog-like creature that he claimed had the head of a rabbit. And as people would do back in the day, he was walking with his rifle and he pulled up and took a shot, but missed, and the creature disappeared. And that's when things started at the house. So in the homestead, with all the folks, the girls had their own room, and then the boys they all shared a bedroom, plus then the adults. So it's just not a mansion they're living in by any means, but a couple bedrooms, a living room, a kitchen, etc. And it started with knocks at their door on the outside, and then scratches and knocks on the exterior walls. And, of course, that's a bit unsettling. There was no electricity in 1817. So, they were trying to figure out what was going on by candlelight, not being able to see very far, once they go outside, unless it's a bright moon. So, they just kind of figured someone was passing by and messed with them. And they were in a place where they had a lot of traffic, if you will. But again, horsebound people, people on foot. So that led to the sounds inside the house of what seemed to be rats gnawing on wood, chains being dragged across the floor, as well as heavy items being dropped on the floors. And all unexplained, of course. Once they lit a candle and they looked around, there was nothing that would be it would be a rat or any animal of the sort gnawing or scratching on any of the inside stuff. No marks left on any of the wood areas. Certainly no chains or no heavy objects or anything out of place. So this led up to eventually the sound of a faint whistle being heard in the house. And the kind of the creepy thing about this is that there was no one whistling, of course. It's not like there's a train nearby that would have been a faint whistle in the distance. The train line hadn't been built in the area yet. There were no factories that would have had a steam whistle or anything like that. No boats on the Red River that was fairly nearby, especially not at that time of night, overnight. So the curiosity of this is the whistle led to a voice, a very faint voice at first, but one that they claim became stronger and more vocal and loud as time went by. And this is where the spirit started to identify itself. And it kind of, it's a curious thing here because this is all secondhand account, many, many years after the passing of most of the family. But the spirit claimed that it was a spirit at rest, but that it was made to be unrestful. And eventually it claimed that it was a Native American spirit whose grave had been desecrated, and it was seeking a tooth that was taken from the gravesite. And there is actually some credibility to this in the accounts that were of the time, where a Native American mound was found. Several bones were removed, one of which was a jawbone, and brought back into the house, where it was dropped or thrown either way against a wall or on the floor. And a tooth came loose and fell through a crack in the floor. And in that, of course, no one ever went after it, because why would they? And once the spirit claimed this, Mr. Bell had the floorboards torn up, and the area underneath, which of course was dirt, there was no foundation really to this home, sifted through, but that tooth was never found. And ironically enough, the spirit then told him that it was messing with them, and it was not true anyway. So this is a curious thing, that the spirit has a bit of a sense of humor, perhaps, or a sick sense of humor, but it was trying to mess with the family. Eventually, and including in the activity, of the spirit, is the pulling off of bed sheets and covers at night in the rooms, where everyone's sleeping, the hair being pulled of every member of the family, men and women, and again, the hassling, if you will, of the family. Eventually, they kept asking, who are you? What are you doing here? And the spirit never would officially identify itself as any one in particular, but it did come to some point of saying that it was the spirit of Kate Batts, who was a neighbor who had passed on, who claimed to her dying day that John Bell swindled her in a land acquisition or purchase sometime in the past. Of course, then that became known as, she became known as the witch, which then became known as John Bell's witch, which then became known as the Bell Witch, hence the name that we are currently now working under. And at some point too, the witch's, the spirit, which we're going to now call the witch, has had the express intent to kill John Bell, and for no unknown reason or any known reason. What's really interesting here is that, you advance the slide, please. What's really interesting here is that Betsy, the youngest daughter of the family, is being tormented exclusively daily by the witch. She is getting pinched. She is getting slapped. She's getting her hair pulled. Go back one, please. And some believe that this is the witch's disdain for Betsy's affection to a local man named Joshua Gardner, who was of a well-to-do family, upstanding citizen, an active and engaged member of the community and the church and so forth, and no real reason to be unliked. But that's the belief. And interestingly enough, too, the witch is really fond of Lucy, John's wife, where she would say favorable things of her and be kind toward her, really low impact of her toward the tormenting of the like sheets being pulled and slapped and pinched and so forth. She was very favored by the witch. So this led to many, many years. And originally, like anybody else, they didn't want to talk about this situation outside the family. And eventually, with Betsy's tormentation or the tormenting of Betsy, I just made up a word, tormentation. Yeah, I did that on live. The concern for her safety and well-being led John to speak to one of their neighbors, and probably his most trusted and best friend, to just discuss it with him and then see if they could come together for a resolution. And this gentleman decided that he would come to their home and stay there until through the night, and then they would, as things were happening, they would check it out and investigate it, which is very much a paranormal investigation, right? So they're early Tennessee ghost hunters. The gentleman came and stayed, and in the lead up to going to bed, he read a chapter of the Bible. They sang some psalms. They were very much the pious family that they always are, but with this gentleman being in the space as well. And went to bed, and sure enough, the same things happened. And it's interesting because now there's more than just the family involved. Also, because of the concern for Betsy's well-being, the family often sent her away to friends and family to stay at overnight. And it seems that the witch would follow her, and the same kind of torment that she would experience at home was happening offsite as well. So there is some range on the witch as well as just the family homestead. So all of this leads to the culmination of John Bell's passing. And as I said earlier, the witch really expressed that she wanted to kill him. And it's interesting because he died in December of 1820. If you go to the next slide, please, with what was called a smoky looking vial of dark colored liquid found by his bedside. And with that, the family didn't understand what it was, and they did, I guess, the scientific method that most anybody would do. They went to test it, but they didn't want to take it themselves, so they gave the liquid to the family cat, and it probably died. Sorry, Dave. Sorry. Apparently, they didn't have a dog. Go figure. And then once they realized that it was poisonous, they threw the vial of the bottle into the fireplace, and it exploded and created a blue flame. So that led to the belief that the witch was involved because of the supernaturalness of a blue flame and so forth, and how it got there in the first place. Interestingly, the haunting essentially stopped at this point, and the spirit left, for lack of a better way of saying it, but it claimed that it would return again in 1828 and again in 1935. And there are accounts saying that did happen as well, although not to any physical altercations as it was having with the Bell family as it was back in up to 1820. So there's a lot of stuff there, and it's much more. There's actually this really good book by an author called M.V. Ingram called The Authenticated History of the Famous Bell Witch. And I'm sorry, you can't see that very well. There we go. Amazon, $9.99. Found it a week or two ago. Very easy read. It's based upon a journal kept by one of the sons, and of all the opportunities that were happening and the things that were happening in the time of the witch. And it was held for a very long time because they did not want to release it until the original members of the family had passed. And actually, one of John Williams' sons, John Williams Bell's sons, is the one that took it to Mr. Ingram, who was a lawyer, and asked him to put it into a book. And also, very curiously, once the book was put into print and published, the original diary notes disappeared, although they are in content within the book starting in chapter 7. And it's quite a bit of detail of all of the various things that happened through the course of that 3-year history of the witch. Some of it's fantastic, and some of it is, if you're a true believer, some of it is very possible. So I'm kind of on the fence to some of it, but thinking about what it could have been and what might have happened, there are a lot of things. And I came across an interesting article from the Tennessean newspaper. Next slide, please. From an author, or the article is written by Dr. Megan Mann, assistant professor of chemistry at the University of Austin Peay in Nashville, who lives semi-close to Adams, Tennessee, and was driving through the area and saw the sign that I had up originally. And there are some other additional signs, like directional signs to the Bell Witch Cave, which I'll get to in a second. And in that, she investigated it. And as a scientist and someone who deals in chemistry, she came to a couple conclusions. One is, it seems kind of maybe obvious, but John Bell was 70 years old when he passed. And when when the witch started to become active, he was in his late 60s, around 66, 67 years old. So there could be a ton of maladies happening there with aging, especially aging in the 1800s, where there was very little medical care for an individual. And it could have been a neurological issue as well. Would have claimed some of the things were like he had facial tics and spasms and so forth, which like a palsy kind of thing. And certainly that is a medical condition, but would not have been diagnosed in the time as such. And the second thing is, it may have been heavy metal poisoning. So, which is a likely thing, considering that arsenic was readily available to most everyone in the era and the time, because it wasn't considered as dangerous as it became known to be later. And in her proposition in this article is that he was likely poisoned slowly over time, potentially by one of his slaves. And we mentioned Chloe came along, and Chloe wound up having 6 or 7 children of her own. And in that time, they certainly were not free. This was still well before the Civil War, and slavery was very prevalent, especially at the farm levels, as this rural community was. So it's quite common to have slaves poison their owners through the course of time, because they had the same access to the materials that the owners did, as far as the arsenic. So that's a curious thing. And so her position is that maybe it's not as supernatural or spirit oriented as believed, although it would have to have had a mass hysteria type element to it for all of the family to be experiencing the things that happened to them in the time that was documented. And there's another suspect. In the documentation, there is a gentleman named Richard Powell, who is a school teacher who took a fancy to Betsy through the course of her instruction. And they all were, these kids all went to school. In the time, it was not as common perhaps in some of the more rural areas, but this was sort of a build-up area by the time these kids started to become school age. and they had a school, the local school, several churches, a whole sense of community in the county, pre-Adams borough or municipality. But he was a school teacher who became infatuated with her and was upset to learn of her engagement or interest in Joshua Gardner. And it was known by the family. He was known to the family. He made several visits to their home. Of course, he's an educator, so he's welcome to come. And it was reported that he had knowledge of things like ventriloquism, the occult, and horticulture, which could lead to, the belief that it was him throwing his voice somewhere nearby to make the sound, the voice of the witch. The occult could be that he drew something in from the outside that would be an elemental thing. And most curiously, 1 year after John died in 1820, he wound up marrying Betsy. So, and interesting also that the haunting stopped, if you will, for all intents and purposes upon John's passing. So it's a curious thing. No direct connect, but I think it's worth pointing out that there are some things that could have happened here that were truly not paranormal, although all of this is fantastic in the paranormal sense. Okay. If you go to the next slide, please. So one of the things that have been found on the property is this cave, and it has become known as the Bell Witch Cave because it is presumed that once John passed, the witch went to this cave as a sanctuary. And individuals who have investigated the cave, as far as the spelunkers and so forth going in, have heard voices. They have felt coldness, even though, obviously we're underground, so it is going to be colder in general in places. They felt like this breeze where there should be no air moving. And there have been bones found in the cave originally. So it's presumed that this is the safe haven of the witch. And it is a tourist site now. You see there's a gate there. There's steps coming from the outside down from the ground, the upper ground level to the cave. And there are regular tours provided in the warm weather months at the site. I thought it was a curious thing. There is no direct connect here, but maybe this is just really good marketing to connect the dots here. But if you go to the site, the original homestead site, if you go to the next slide, please, there is a very good website. You could take a tour, both of the cave and of the homestead. The house is no longer, as I mentioned, but it has been rebuilt, at least to as close to period as possible. So there are things to see and do, and there are original artifacts on site in the home still, plus the property site to review and walk through. So it's not as rustic a space as it used to be, but there's quite a few things. And for our paranormal friends, which I hope is everyone who's watching, if you go to the next slide, you can do a paranormal investigation there. So they're offering packages where you can do the cave and the home at the same time. You can actually camp there and stay overnight if you wish to, if you're brave enough. As investigators ourselves, guys, I think we need a road trip. It's only about a 12-hour drive to get down there. So from here in South Central PA, but
it's actually not a difficult drive. You just hit 81 south and you just stay on that road.
Yep, 81 to 40, and then take it north after you get to Nashville. Absolutely, yep. I made that drive to at least that far many times. Our family used to vacation in Nashville every year, so it's not bad. It's very doable, especially if it with a plan. So that's probably everything I have. I should say I'll get back to the source material. So the original diary that was kept by Richard Williams Bell, one of the sons of John Bell Sr., is the source material for the book, this book. The author has added some stuff in the early chapters, as authors do, some freedom of content. But once you get to chapter 7 and after, you really start to get into the diary itself and the accounts from memory, of course, because the book was printed about 74 years after John passed, till he and his sons and daughters all passed through or passed on. That's when it was allowed to be released. So it is notes, it is recollection, it is, and how things get fuzzy over time. There might be some sensationalism added because of that. But there is so much stuff that happened there that's documented in the book that it is fantastic to me to believe that is a made up story. Something happened there. Just how much of it is fact or fiction is really, I think, is lost to history. But it makes it a really cool original American folklore story that has had legs for 200 years. Of all of our time coming through this, the story is really cool and unique. So that's my book report. What are your thoughts? What do you think, Dave?
I am familiar with the area, much like you. I lived in Huntsville, Alabama for a number of years, and spent a lot of time up in Nashville, and am familiar with the area. I'm familiar with the actual geography of the area, and knowing the people, knowing the mindset, and then having research back to what it was like back in back in this time frame. I can see how both a terrestrial cause and a hysteria amongst the family could lead to the belief in a witch and the belief in the supernatural happenings. And when you add in the portion about the jilted lover, or the not so much the jilted lover, but the lover that never was to be, who had the means and the motive to harass or oppress the, and he's a person, so to harass the family. I see this kind of more, I'm not saying that nothing happened, but it's tough for me when you put all of the, when you apply Occam's razor, where the simplest answer, the most logical answer is probably the answer. When you start adding things together, and like for me, I'm on the side of there potentially not being much of anything, and it having been, answered with, natural causes versus supernatural causes. However, once you get into the threat that it was going to happen again in 1938?
Yep, 1935, and dates again. Sorry, I'm not having it memorized. 1828, 1935.
1828, 1935. And that there are reports that, they had things going on at that point. However, again, is that a documented, was this a documented threat? And also, was, the people that are reporting it, is it somebody that's looking, confirmation bias is the term I'm looking for. Is it somebody that was looking for something going on in that? Now, in regards to, because I see Ernie has put a comment in about it being the energy being of Native American origin and not of witchery. That I can believe. That it's a very heavily, heavily Native American influenced area there as well. And back in those days, you were the 1700s, the 1800s. You were looking at Western expansion and the the presence of Native Americans and their burial grounds and such being a lot newer than what they are today. I mean, you have a lot of things that just play into a potentially terrestrial answer or Native American answer versus a witch answer.
Yeah, and it is known to be Native American land. There were, as I mentioned, there were mounds found on the property. The cave is believed to have been at some point used as at least something to do with rituals in the Native American cultures. And that could be why bones were found there. And some, of course, were animal bones as well. So who knows? It could have been a predator living in the cave. But I totally agree. And Ernie, thanks for the point. That is something that's prevalent that is lost in this story because it's told by white people. And the recounting is of the family, of the settling family. but there was no one to tell the story of the land before, who possessed the land and what happened on it that left anymore. So it's a curious thing. One of the other sides of this that I didn't really cover, and I really recommend looking at this book. I mean, it's a really cool story. It's only about 160 pages. It's a summer beach read. Everyone, hint for your vacations.
Who
But
was on
there,
vacation?
I know, right? Chad does. Yeah, look at it, smile. The witch was said to have been able to tell the accounts of like a sermon provided at a church, at two separate churches that were 15 miles apart, and recount the sermons verbatim from both churches. And that is fantastical, in the sense of it being a person at that point, without some extra knowledge of what's going on at each of them. There was no iPads or anything back then. Everything was scribbled out. I'm assuming not with a fluid ink pen yet, but how that could happen was really uniquely interesting to me, because or the tale that one of the sons had a business interest back in North Carolina that was believed to a property that was believed to have been whoever owned it had passed, and he was going to go back to settle the affairs and collect whatever his interest in it was. And the witch advised him not to go because the issue wasn't settled yet. And also that if he went, he would miss out on meeting a particular woman who was coming into the area, who was quite striking. And he went anyway. And 6 months later, he came back with no money and none of the presumed resources that he was going to go collect, plus the tales that woman, passed through the area shortly after he left and was gone by the area by the time he got back, and he missed the opportunity. So it's a really curious thing that some of the stuff that the witch was expressing was connected to real facts, and how the witch would know what's happening in North Carolina, which at that point was still a horse ride away and several days travel, a week or more travel, is really unbelievable. So quite a lot of stuff like that in the tales and in the minutiae of the tales. So again, looking at more of this potentially being supernatural than it is factual or human, or as you mentioned, Dave, terrestrial. I like that term. We'll use it. Anyway, I'm rambling on. Chad, what do you think?
I think I tend to agree with Dave. I think a lot of it is more lore, and there may be some things here and there, but I just feel like it's a lot more lore than it is supernatural. But you said there's a lot of details that are hard to explain, which is why it becomes a story and why it's repeated and why we have discussions like this about it. So it is interesting. If I'm definitely up for a road trip at some point. When I have vacation, I mean.
Well, you're not on vacation. Come on.
No, but it really is interesting. So.
Yeah, and like when we go to places, places that used to be out of the way are easily accessible now because of just industry. The sprawl of us as humans. I think about the Hinsdale House. How once upon a time it was way out there. And there was a stagecoach stop nearby, which what what was being the attraction to draw people to the home. The fellows from the house were casing riders essentially and offering those who looked affluent a place to stay for the night, and taking them back and then killing them, at least by story. And now we stay at a hotel that's 15 minutes away from the place, because the town's there now. So it's really interesting how places have become accessible like this. The easy access of, and the term para-vacation. I love that, Jason. That we kind of do that when we go away. We tend to spend a couple days at a place. Dave, you take your sweet time getting to some of these places by making stops along the way for your own interests and special things you're looking for. So, yeah, we do tend to make offsite investigations a bit of an event. So, I'm in. Let's go. Let's leave tomorrow.
Ernie says that they are, open for public investigations, and those who have been there say it's very active. So,
Okay.
It's definitely interesting. But again, with all the Native American things that are happening around there, I would tend to believe that it's a lot more of that than something else. But
I agree. I do. And when you start adding things together and the lack of, great documentation other than a story, and I don't want to discredit the diary and the publication, for being someone's best presentation of the facts as they recall them. But they're still well after the fact. The accumulation of the information was done well after the fact of the actual events, and things get lost to memory, and or misbelieved. It's whispered down the lane to some degree, especially with a couple people getting together. As I understand, the siblings all got together and kind of chatted through this. Not everybody remembers things the same way, and who gets to be the narrator at that point? If one is not remembering the same as the other, they could just be the whisper down the lane that changes, by the time you get to the end, very quickly. So I'll take it as a grain of salt as well. A curious thing, but I'd like to see it just to experience it as well. So, okay. That's all I got. Thanks, guys.
Yeah.
Thanks everybody for chiming in as well. We're going to use that para-vacation term somewhere along the way this summer. I love it.
Yeah, we have a couple trips planned as a group, so
yep, absolutely.
So, all right, so are we ready to move on to what's coming up?
Yeah, sounds good.
Tammy sort of led into this. And said, "Can't wait for next Saturday. This is our second time joining you." So, Dave, let's follow up on that.
Yep, coming up, we have an investigation this Saturday, specifically on the 10th, at Booby's Brewery. We have plenty of room left. If you want to get to investigate with us, come on down. We also have investigations on the 24th, July the 8th, July the 17th. I'm sorry, July the 17th. We're going to Crescent Sanatorium, which is it's a Monday. And it was a date specifically chosen because it's one of our group members' birthdays, and it's an investigation specifically to celebrate that. And then we have another public on the 22nd of July, and on the 29th of July we go to the White Hill Mansion. You can get tickets for our public investigation at the link listed there on the screen, and we will be headed out to. We have a number of things on the schedule. One of the things that moving forward, looking way down the road to the end of the summer, we have our Red Mill investigation with Daryl Marcy and some of the other groups, some other folks, special guests, groups that are helping out. We're running it. There's going to be a lot of festivities there. It's going to be a fantastic time. Daryl is a fantastic time, and that's in New Jersey, and it's going to be Labor Day weekend. And I'm just pointing out that my cat ball above my television is going off right now, catching my attention out of the corner of my eye. So is there anything else on there? Oh, we got the Ghostly Truth. Ghostly Truth is our new investigation show that is currently in production. Is being the A and the B roll is being cut together. It's being sent off to production to get done and polished up for release. And we are very excited about this. You have Justin and Courtney, Matt and Andrew. They all went to the location is the Bainbridge Inn in Bainbridge, Pennsylvania. So hopefully we'll get that cut together and polished up and ready for viewing here soon and release here soon. And we're looking forward to that as well. And this is our social media. We have all manner of social media because you have to be engaged in all manner of platforms. There's our TikTok, our Instagram, our YouTube, our Facebook. I think we have a Twitter as well. I'm not certain, but I think we also have a Twitter. And come on, reach out. You can interact with all of us, individuals. We monitor it. We have a social media. What's the word I'm looking for? We have a social media point of contact. So if you're looking to get in touch with anybody in particular, or if you're just wanting to interact with the group and find out more about the group, or send us any of your, if you're experiencing stuff and you want to send us some photos, or if you've been a member of one of our investigations and you want to share some of the evidence that you have procured from boobies in investigations with us, that this is where you would share it with us on our social media. And I think that's it. Pew, pew, pew.
Well versed, like we've done it 10 times already, right?
Yeah, this is the 10th episode, right? And we're going to be skipping. We're skipping next week. We're off next week.
We're here next week.
We're here next
week after that.
Week after that.
Because Chad's on vacation again.
Well,
yeah,
not a pair of vacation this time. So.
That's cool. That's very cool.
Right.
Right. So, thanks everybody for dropping some comments. We really appreciate the engagement. It's good to know someone's actually watching this. But if there's any place you'd like us to talk, or anything you'd like us to talk about, or any place you'd like us to see and do, drop a line. We're always looking for new opportunities, and we really value your feedback. Just to give us a pulse for what we're doing, how we're doing it. So we appreciate you all very, very, very much. And
absolutely. And I want to, he's been very active tonight. I want to send a special thank you out and a shout out to the paranormal investigators of Middle Pennsylvania, and led by Jason Coombs there. If you have the opportunity, go ahead and check them out as well. Very much an interactive group. A lot of they just did a fantastic investigation. I was looking at all the pictures today, and I cannot remember where it was, but they just went and did a great investigation. Have a lot of pictures and stories posted up there, so give them check them out as well.
They're on Facebook.
Yeah, they are.
Yep.
An active group. Great bunch of guys. They're all named Jason. Go figure. I'm just kidding. They're most of them are named Jason. So. Just fun guys to hang out with. Lockridge Furnace.
There it is.
Cool.
All right. Well, this is where we say goodnight, and we'll see you next week. Who's got the topic for next week, and what are we doing?
Next week will be me. I'm not sure what the topic's going to be yet. I'm thinking about digging into White Hill Mansion because I know nothing about it, but we're going there in a couple of weeks. I know you guys have both been there, but maybe if we present some stuff out to the team.
I have not been there. Jamie has.
Oh, you haven't, Dave? Okay.
No.
So, I might dig into that a little bit and have some background for us, Dave. So
cool. Yeah, it's a cool place, a really cool place. I'm so excited to get back there in the end of July. It's been probably 2 years since we were there, so quite a lot of history in that joint. And a neat building too, neat property where it's located.
I've seen some podcast or heard some podcasts on it, and it seems like there's a lot of history there and a lot going on. So
yeah, absolutely. It goes way back. So back in the day.
So all right. Well, if that's it, we will see everybody in a week. Unless you're at the investigation on Saturday, then we'll see you there.
Yeah, sounds good. Thanks, guys.
All right, guys.
Thanks, everybody.